And we are ready for the program to start at 2 o'clock, and we're here for the next hour. Hope you'll stay tuned. Don't you dare leave. What is that they say when you get ready to break for a commercial? I tell you what's happening on the other side of the commercial and tell you not to move. And if you move, they're going to look through the screen and stop you from going to the kitchen, getting a sandwich, and whatever else you do during the time to do the commercial breaks. I don't have to worry about that because I take all my programs. I don't have the time to watch the programs and then the commercials and all of that because I'm not going to buy anything the advertising anyway, particularly these drugs. I want you to be aware. That's why we chose the title we chose today. I want you to be aware of what they're doing right now on the federal level. They seem like they seem like they're hell bent on stopping Donald Trump. They couldn't stop him through the election this past time, and you can deny all you want to, but this was a landslide election. This was a mandate. And they keep trying to act like there's no mandate. When you get 312 electoral votes and you only need 270 to become the president of the United States, and you got 50 votes above that, and then look at the popular vote. They keep saying that this was the comeback on Donald Trump's part, but this is not a comeback because every year that Donald Trump ran, his votes went up. They went up even in the 2020 election that he lost, that they say he lost. His vote totals went up by 12 million votes from what he had in 2016. And then this time, and you get different numbers based on what polling you are being attentive to, but I think this time you have to say you got, 77 to 79 million votes. So let's see, the first election, 63 million, thereabouts, and then 75 million. And in this past election, I think I've been going with the numbers of 79 million votes, but the lowest number I've seen is like 77 million votes. And so he keeps increasing his numbers, and they're trying to deny that this past election there was no mandate. But if you don't have a mandate with that many votes in your till, then there are no mandates that are possible then, unless you carry all the states as Reagan did, I think, except one, and then Nixon carried every state except one in 1972. If these are not mandates, and you're getting and these electoral elections are not close, then what is it? What is a mandate then? A mandate to me is when you get more than 50% of the vote. I'm talking about the electoral vote. You get more than 50% because all you need is 269. That's half of all the electoral votes, and get one more above that. And if you get one vote above what is necessary for you to become president, you have a mandate. Because the mandate is you keep saying you believe in democracy. Well, the majority is in the electoral vote is 269 plus one, so it's 270. At 270, you got a mandate because the majority is the mandate. The majority you claim you like democracy, and we have a democracy. You keep saying you want to protect our democracy. I don't say that because I know democracy was not intended. But if you say that, then you got to go with the mandate, then being the majority voice in the country. And that's what we have right now by a landslide, because it was a landslide election. This election was not close. Donald Trump got 306 electoral votes in 2020. Let's see, he got 306 electoral votes in 2016 when he won the election. Hillary got 232 electoral votes. She had more popular votes than he did in that election, but Donald Trump had the states he won. In those states, look at the map, you see all of the red in the on the electoral map, and he didn't get the popular vote. But when you look at the electoral vote, where he had 306 electoral votes, and that was a mandate in electoral vote. And what Donald Trump did this past time was to take out all doubt that he was in fact that he had a mandate to run the country. I mean, he was kind of fortuitously looking at the fact they were trying to act like he didn't have any momentum to go forward with his agenda, running again on MAGA. And they wanted to claim that, well, okay, in 2016, they were saying, okay, you got the electoral vote, but you didn't get the popular vote. And so where's the mandate here? Well, how do we elect the president of the United States? You elect the president of the United States directly by the electoral vote. And when Donald Trump had 306 electoral votes, that's a mandate, because if you understand how we elect the president in this country, we don't elect the president by the popular vote. And I'm glad it doesn't happen that way, because what you don't want is that you don't want majority rule. You don't want majority-tyranny, where it's a matter of how many votes on one side and how many votes on the other side, and the number of votes on the two sides will determine how the country is run. You don't want that, because you could have a majority vote that would be on one side, and it doesn't have to take into consideration the minority vote, just simply rule over the minority, because their vote is in fact overrun by the majoritarian point of view. And the majoritarian point of view is very often wrong. The majority view on the Supreme Court is often wrong. The way you have these rulings, where the courts later on overturn themselves, because the majority vote does not necessarily mean the vote is in fact correct. You can't put your finger up in the air and then test the vote with the wind and say, well, there are more over here. All those on that side say aye, and that you listen to that what that vote total is, and how many votes on the other side? Let me hear you say aye. And they determine that this vote has it over that vote, and they did it by how many. It sounds like there was more over here than it was over there, or vice versa. If that's how you determine how you're going to run the country, that's problematical. And if you think that's what the framers thought, then you have not read the Federalist Papers, particularly the ones written by James Madison. Even the Imperial Alexander Hamilton, you can read his essay on that. That's essay number 9. And then Madison picked up the discussion that was started by Alexander Hamilton. And then in the essay written in number 10, you could go read what he had to say, picking up on the idea of the factions in the country, and then how he began to refine it and carry it further. And now we know exactly what the framers were thinking about the majoritarian view. Didn't have a lot of respect for it. And I don't know it just from the Federalist Papers. I know it because it's not mentioned in the documents. It's not mentioned in the Constitution of the United States. It's not mentioned in the Declaration of Independence. They were abhorrent about that. What I want to talk about today, what I really want to talk about today, and what I've been writing about for the last 2 days, I've been writing about looking at the Alien Sedition Act of 1798, and what drew my attention back to it was the fact that Donald Trump was using it. Now, here's this person supposed to be a dictator, and they keep saying he's a dictator. The man, he's not going to leave office. He's already left office one time. He's not going to give up power. The man gave up power when he thought he won the election in 2020. His followers were saying, went there to say that he did not lose the election, and I'm lucky that I didn't go there, because I would have gone there to stand with him on that as well, because I know those numbers do not work. There's no way in the world that anomaly can be true, where you have the president of the United States as an incumbent getting more votes, 12 million more votes as an incumbent They did it when he ran as an outsider against a seasoned politician, Hillary Clinton. That was a major hurdle to overcome there, because he was a man never held in elective office and was coming as an outsider and had to fight his own party. He had, I think, 16 persons he had to put down and defeat in the primaries to win the nomination, and they were chomping at the bits. They didn't want an outsider in that position, being the nominee of their party. Not when they've been in Washington, seasoned politicians, expecting to move up through the ranks and eventually become the head of the country. That's the aspiration they have. And here comes this outsider, pushing them to the side. And who is this guy coming in here? And they've been and these are seasoned career politicians. Here's a man doesn't have an elective office. How are you going to be happy with him coming in and showing your unworthiness to run, because you have a track record? He doesn't have a track record. And this vote is not only an endorsement, it's also rejection, because you got a track record. And they were saying no to it by endorsing Donald Trump, the outsider. They weren't pleased with that in the Republican Party. And this man came and won the election and so on and so forth, put down 16 to 17 of the candidates in the primaries. This was a bloodbath. Talking about a mandate. This is a political bloodbath to go in there and do that one after the other. And I remember Donald Trump saying that when he had a few others that were still standing after the first primaries were run, he was picking them off one at a time. But he said, there's still a couple of them I got to still, pick off and complete what he started. And when it was all said and done, it was really amazing. This man was still standing, the last one standing in a field of seasoned politicians. Here's a non-politician running as he did and overturning all of the traditions where that's not supposed to happen. A man that has no military background, has no elective office he's running from, never has been voted into any political office on the national level or even on the state level, coming out of the business world. But that wasn't supposed to happen, and persons did not think it was going to happen, but it did. And when it did happen, it happened with a mandate that the president had by the electoral vote, the direct vote in which we elect the president of this country. Well, I've been writing the last couple of days of the Alien and Sedition Act. I wish you would read it. That needs to be read. We need to bring that back into the public discussion, because Donald Trump attempted to use it in terms of the defense of his position, his authority to deport illegal aliens out of the country. And I think that's the issue. I was very happy to see where, when they were questioning on it and they were asking them, where's your right to do that? We are going through the court. And Stephen Miller was asking the question, what authority did Joe Biden have? What authority does he have to bring in these illegal aliens and let them invade this country? What constitutional right is that? Where is that found in the law? Where does it say you can violate the law by enforcing the law through its violation? Show me that, because you have to show me that in terms of what has happened, in terms of all these persons being in this country right now. And Donald Trump is trying to deport these persons. They shouldn't be in the first place. He's trying to deport them. And they ask him, where's the authority come from? Well, Donald Trump went, maybe he didn't do it, but someone in his camp went back and visited the Alien and Sedition Act of 1798. And I think it needs to be read. By the way, there were 4 acts altogether. But the Alien Sedition Act is primary. I've been writing about it because I think we need to look at what Donald Trump was, in fact, what they were intending by bringing that back up. And I can see why they want to use it, because what they were doing in that year, this is 12 years after the uh, this is 10 years after the ratification of the Constitution, and 6 years after them adding the so-called Bill of Rights to the Constitution. I'm saying 6 years. Yeah, the Bill of Rights was 1791. Okay, 7 years. 7 years. And they're passing the House of Representatives and the Congress are passing the Alien and Sedition Act in the aftermath of the ratification of the Constitution and in the aftermath of the Bill of Rights, which had occurred 7 years earlier, which is major to understand, because if there was such a violation of any tenets of the law, look at the time, look at the chronology of the act being passed. And when I went back to revisit it again, you cover this and you do cover this in your training. I don't think they covered it with the depth that they should have, because I went back to read it again, and I am convinced. I'm absolutely convinced now that I read it again. You have to go back and read. That's one thing about the studying that you engage in. You're doing it for a grade. You're doing it for all the wrong reasons, really. When you're doing it for a grade and doing it for a degree, that has a commercial reason, but really, the knowledge should be for the sake of knowledge, the sake of knowing what you engage in the college level. Quite frankly, is that you are engaged in the development of the mind, and that development is what you really are after, to get further training and get further development, so you can begin to use a greater part of your brain, so you can become more analytical and figure things out. And I think the training should be focused on that. But then if you don't have the paper, you don't walk through the doors. So that's important also. But I went back to read it again. You read it in grad school, and when you're reading it, you're reading it because there's going to be a test on the side of it. So 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 you're learning enough of it to pass the test. But to go back and then look at it in more for more depth in what it's saying, it was amazing. I could not believe I had read it when I read it again, because I was saying that I didn't pick all this up when I went through the grad classes. But I would tell you this: to read it more carefully and to be calmly, you don't have to worry about it. There's not the pressure about reading it. When I read it this last, I read it again after it was used by Trump. I said, let me go back and review this. And I was amazed at how much of the authority the framers were placing in the hands of the President of the United States in terms of that act, which had, let's see, the Alien Sedition Act had six parts to it. The Alien Sedition Act had 6 parts to it, but the Alien Sedition Acts were a combination of 4 acts altogether. One of them was the Enemies Act, which was persons inside the country. This was designed to deal with people inside the country that were doing what they're doing, what this guy was doing over there at Columbia University. And that part of the act was to be here on the goodwill of the nation, and coming here to undermine the nation once you get here. And the framers then had added that this was ratified at a different time. This was added to the Constitution, added to the law, not to the Constitution, added to the law at a different time than the Alien Sedition Act, which was, let's see if I can think of the date here, somewhere around, I think that one might have been the one that was around June the 8th or something. Maybe I get them the time period mixed up a little bit in terms of I know one was in June and one was in November, different time periods, but there are four of them all together that year. And it's interesting to read what the framers had in mind, because I keep in mind when I was reading it, I was keeping in mind, well, they just ratified the Constitution. That was 12 years earlier when it was ratified, since it was ratified in 1788. So that'd be 10 years, wouldn't it? Yes, that'd be 10 years. And then 1791, the ratification of the Bill of Rights. They call it the Bill of Rights. They call it that. Call it the Bill of Rights. The 10 amendments were added as a consortium in 1791, and they are, and so to look at the time period, which is very important because they had the rights on their mind at this time because they wanted to make sure they were tying government down. They didn't want to pass anything that's going to, you know, how you say you want to give more power to the federal government. They didn't want to give more power to the federal government. They thought that was a danger. They were trying to keep power out of the hands of the federal government. That's why they dispersed it. So they passed the Alien Sedition Act, and to read that act, as I did 2 weeks for the last 2 weeks, I've been looking at it more and more, trying to get it's a lot of reading there. It's more reading than I thought it was, because I'm just glancing through it in grad school. I'm just trying to get, you know, enough information. I'm trying to learn the information, but I'm also trying to get enough information to make sure I can memorize what it says so I can go in there and do what they require, because the universities don't care how much depth it is. They want you to be able to answer these specific questions. So I'm reading it with the idea that I got to be able to speak to it with some coherence on these essay tests, because they give you a lot of essay tests at the grad level, and not that multiple choice. Not that multiple choice and the true false stuff you get in undergrad school. Undergrad school is like you get something. I wouldn't do that if I when I taught on the college level. Did I do true false question? I didn't do true false question, because that's like 50%. You can know nothing and pass that test. I didn't do true false. I didn't do a whole lot of. I like to fill in the blank type thing. And that's that. But they do essay at the grad level, grad level, because they want you to write you on, because they can see if you really understand what you're talking about. But they want you to write it out, to write. Question. Here's a question. You got to write that question. You got to write on that question. If you don't have enough depth to do that, you're in trouble on that test. And I was doing a lot of reading, but I was doing it I wanted to pass a test, but I was reading this last time because I want to be able to defend Donald Trump. That's what I was doing. I wanted to read it because Donald Trump was using it, and I wanted to be able to write to see if it would allow me to get behind Donald Trump and give a defense of what Donald Trump is in fact doing. And I will tell you something that really jumps off that page. It's amazing how much of the Alien and Sedition Act they're saying the president. You should read my post today. I did a combination of the writing on it today in my post. But what is amazing in it is how they would the deference, how much deference the legislative branch of government paid to the president. And they were paying it because they were paying deference to the Constitution of the United States. They're not doing the stuff they're doing today, where this judge, what's that guy's name? Bose something. This guy, these judges, it's about 235. It's about 235 of these progressives that put on the court. And Schumer let the genie out the bottle when he said this. He said that they asked him a question of whether or not the government is out of control. Of course, is out of control for him, because he's saying Donald Trump is trying to do all these dictatorial things. But he said that, but we put 235 members on the court, and they are striking down everything he's doing. So they're stopping him. Yeah, they're stopping him, but they're stopping him from his agenda that was in fact voted upon by the American people to make the country great again. And part of that was the deportation of these illegal aliens in this country. So the Alien Sedition Clause is very important to read because there you're reading about what the framers back at the time when they were putting this country together, what they had in mind. And it's amazing to read it, because I was reading it recently, having gone over it, but reading it recently, to see to see more carefully, to read it more carefully, to see what they had in mind that close to the ratification of the Constitution of the United States, and even closer to adding to the document the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, which are amendments to the Constitution, not the Constitution itself, by the way. Keep that in mind. These are amendments to the Constitution, not the Constitution itself. You can see that in terms of when they write out the Constitution, they put that in one part, and then those who sign the names to it. Then they put in another part the amendments, and they don't put it. They don't. I have a Constitution, and they put it in two different parts of that document, because the amendments are not the Constitution. That you need to understand that the amendments are amendments to the Constitution, and that's why I have said many times, on many occasions, that you have to pay attention to the amendments to make sure that the amendments are not contravening the Constitution, because the Constitution is that which they came together to come together to form the nation around, what that document said at that particular point in time, not what it said later. Those that came in there after the 13 colonists, they didn't ratify the Constitution. They came in, and any ratification they did, their ratification was on the amendments to the Constitution. The Constitution is already drafted by the time more than 13 states are added as additions to the country. Tennessee and those states. That's later on. The 13 states were the ones that ratified the Constitution. There will be no ratification of the Constitution again. They're ratifying the amendments to it. And you have to pay attention to what those amendments say to make sure they don't contravene the document, because you cannot. I keep saying this. I don't know if anybody else is saying this, or if they'll agree with me on this, that you cannot amend the document so that it ceases being the document that was ratified. Can I say that without you scholars getting mad? You cannot amend the document so it ceases being the document that was ratified in 1788. Now, I know that will cause a storm, but let me tell you this. You cannot amend the document so it ceases being the document that was in fact ratified in 1788, because you cannot go back and amend original intent. You have to always bring out what's the original intent of what they were doing. That's the question. What was the original intent behind it? And since you can't go back and change the intent that's actually in the document itself, they wanted to make sure they restrained power. That's the original intent, to draw up to draft a document that would, in fact, after the experience they had with King George III, they want to make sure they restrained. They want to make sure they did not create another king. They were tired of that. They were sick of that. They're not doing that. And when you go through the Articles of Confederation to get to the Constitution, you can see that they really had a fetish about making sure that didn't happen, because they didn't let the federal government do anything. They only had one branch of government at that time to make sure they tied it down. They wanted such a limited government. They didn't have a executive branch of government or a judicial branch of government. Think about that for a minute with these judicial this judicial branch we have today being out of control, thinking they can tell the president of the United States what to do. I'm sorry, you can't do it. You can't. The three branches of government is not intended that these are co-equal branches of government. Can we all get to that point? These are co-equal, co-sovereign branches of government, each one sovereign in their own domain. And I wrote today on a part 2 Facebook post that judicial review is not a constitutional claim. Now that would you cannot argue with that because judicial review does not exist. There's no wording in the Constitution that even mentions judicial review. Just like it does not mention executive review or legislative review. It doesn't have to, because if they are co-equal and co-sovereign branches of government, then the review is inherent in the responsibilities that are in fact delegated to it within its domain. The president is the executive officer of the United States. His job is to make sure that he faithfully executes the laws of the United States. His job is that of law enforcer. Therefore, the interpretation of the law is incidental to carrying out that responsibility. You cannot do it without having interpretation of the law. So they all are law interpreters. And there's no hierarchy in the Constitution that delegates the authority singly to the Supreme Court. You can say what you want to. I'm telling you this. It cannot be done. I've been listening to, and I'll be writing about this probably tomorrow on my post. I've been listening to Mark Levine in his program I listen to him when anybody talks about the Constitution, I'm interested. That pricks my interest. I want to see what they say. And what Mark Levine does, and I keep listening to him every weekend. He comes on Saturday and Sunday. And he gets he pontificates. He's very crafty, very clever. He pontificates. He preaches to the choir every weekend. And they don't catch him. The choir does not catch him at what this man is actually doing. But what Mark Levine is doing is that he pontificates as if he is a upholder of the Constitution of the United States. But what he's doing is placating. He's talking on both sides of the fence, so to speak. He's placating the overthrow of the Constitution in the sense that he does not call for what has. If you're going to pontificate about what's wrong with what they're doing, then what are you going to advocate then as the solution to it? He never does that. Last night he did this. He had the attorney Sean on his program. Saturday night he had Sean, the attorney, one of the attorneys who was Donald Trump's attorney during the first or second impeachment, one of the two impeachments. And he brought a guest on. This is Mark Levine bringing one of his guests, bringing his guest on. He always has two guests. And he was talking about they're doing this and they're doing that. He found it all illegitimate, and that is not to be done. It's overreach and so on and so forth. And then when it brings the attorney on there, the conversation then switched to something different from that. You know what the question, leading question was? He asked the attorney, "Have you ever seen anything like that, like this before?" What does that have to do with the price of tea in China? The question is, you said that this is overreaching the power of the judges. The question for the attorney is, what do you suggest we do about it? And what I suggest we do, about it is that we simply act as if these persons that are making these rulings against the Constitution of the United States be dismissed. What you do in that case there is you bring the Constitution into it to resolve the issue. You don't have the court to resolve it. How can the court resolve an issue that involves the three branches of government as a co-equal member of the government? You have the Constitution to resolve it. Do you scholars agree with that or not? You're gonna have to give me a break. You're gonna take the matter to the court and have the court resolve a matter that involves one of the branches of government. The court cannot resolve that problem. They are a interested party in the discussion. They can't resolve it. They have a vested interest on one side of the issue. Their side. You don't ask the court to resolve that. You have the Constitution to resolve it. And how does the Constitution resolve it? If they're out of their lane, you have the President of the United States, who is the executive officer of the United States. If you're in his lane, the president acts within his lane and gets him out of his lane, and then let the court decide what you do about it. That's how George Washington handled it. See, they keep saying that. See, they say this to the layman. I'm not a layman. I was saying this when I saw Napolitano being jammed up by Rob Finnerty on Newsmax. Rob Finnerty did a very good job in the interview he did with Napolitano. He was bringing Napolitano in there to talk about some of the things that Napolitano was claiming. He didn't bring him on for that reason. He brought him in to get his insights on some issue they were discussing. But in that discussion, Napolitano went into some areas here to show that he's a lightweight passing for a heavyweight. And I said in writing about that discussion that John Finnerty, that Rob Finnerty did a very good job of taking him to school. But I had to say this also: I'm not Rob Finnerty. And when he was talking about and what Napolitano was talking about was that the use of the Alien Sedition Act could not be used because it's a timepiece. And there is a limit in terms of what you see. What happened with the Alien Sedition clause, that act? What happened there was that they allowed it to expire, but it was never repealed. It was never carried and challenged in the court for its right to exist. It just simply expired. Let's say the Alien Sedition Act was to apply for as long as the act was a matter of law. So it was it expired. They were saying it was applicable during the time that the law was applicable. But you see, that's only one part of the issue here. The other part of the issue is the mindset of the framers and what they intended. What was the original intent? What was intended by these illegal aliens? The person in the country that might have been here legally, But let's say that they're no longer wanted in the country because the country's changed its mind. You're here at the behest of the country. You're here as a guest of the country. You come here and do some things that violate your being a guest. Your manners are not what the country decides it should not be to be a guest of this country. It didn't want you out of here, and it has a right to change its mind. That law would have been applicable during the time that law was still excellent on the books. But even if when it expired, it was never declared. There was never a declaration against it anywhere. They just simply didn't renew the law. But the law having existed tells us a lot about what the framers had in mind, and they had in mind what Donald Trump is in fact doing. Donald Trump is doing exactly what. How can he be a dictator? Number one, he stepped down. That's part of it. But how can he be a dictator if he's in fact acting in the frame of reference of the framers of the Constitution of the United States? This is what they were in fact doing. Those that were closest to the augmentation of the document, that's what Donald Trump is in fact doing. Here's a dictator that they're claiming, but doing that which has already been done by those who would have known best what they were doing in drafting the document, because they were still alive at that time. I can tell you this too. There's no doubt about the fact that they would have honored their word when they ratified the document in 1788 and had promised that in the aftermath of being ratified, they would come back and revisit the Constitution, and they would in fact put in the objections that those persons had that said they would not go along with it unless they added to it what they later on would call the Bill of Rights. And they did that, but not to have done it, they knew what would have happened. What that would have ignited was them going back to fight again among themselves. We would have had a civil war at that time. And they knew they could not go back on their word, and they would not have done it anyway because they believed they were not saying it out of one side of their mouth and then had another idea that they would have out of the other side of their mouth. They were not talking about both sides of their mouth. They wanted to satisfy the objections, respected the opposition. They were not this person. It's not this personal stuff where you got this one side would say yes, and then because they said yes, the other side would say no. They were not doing that. Not at that time. We graduated down that level where the country be damned, and we're going to make a determination based upon the fact that we are in opposition to the other camp, and there's under no terms are we going to agree. But oh boy, is there getting ready to be a reckoning now. You saw it last week. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was called in to answer for her subverting the augmentation of the deportation of illegal people in this country. And they brought her before the Pam Bundy was in that chair speaking to her in the Congress of the United States. And she was very, AOC as they call it, was very smug at first until Pam Bundy pulled out comments she had made and references she had been talking about to show that she was in fact involved in the obstruction of the law. That whole room changed. All the energy of that room was sucked out of that room. You didn't see this, but they had a meeting after that was over in Pocahontas. Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts they had a meeting with AOC, telling her you need to stop defeating your argument. You're talking too much, and you give them more ammunition because Pam Bundy plans to go go after her. They now filed a criminal charge against AOC. That would never happen under the Biden administration. They could have gotten away with that because Biden would have licensed it. But there's a new sheriff in town, and they're going after the ones inside the government that are subverting the government. And that's why I was disappointed in Mark Levine, because Mark Levine will pontificate about how these judges are out of control, and they are out of control. What they're doing is not constitutional. But what's the caveat to that? If it's unconstitutional, then what Trump should be doing with it, because he has been sworn into office to obey and defend and protect the Constitution of the United States, and not doing that, he's violating his oath of office by following these judges who are not following the Constitution. He can't follow the judges unless they're following the Constitution, because that's where his oath is. Those 35 words are that the president cannot go into office without saying those 35 words. Those words are there for a reason. You are committed to upholding the Constitution of the United States. And the Constitution of the United States is consistent in terms of being a document. I don't know where the song came from, "We Are the World." That's not what the framers were thinking. Their view was, we are the people of the United States of America. That's their idea. This idea, "We Are the World," it's a good song. It's musical fantasy. We're not the world. We're 4% of the population of the world. We're not the world. Never intend to be the world. We intend to be the United States of America. And that's what they're fighting Donald Trump over. Because what they're fighting over is something much larger than what the Constitution will allow them to be fighting over. Because the Constitution is very clear. We, the people of the United States of America, do ordain, at the end of it, do ordain to establish this Constitution of the United States of America, because that's where the emphasis was. The emphasis was not upon this global design. They were trying to perfect we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, not a more perfect world. You're never going to be able to do that. You can't control everything that goes on outside your borders. At least you can control what's going on in your borders, and you arm yourself defensively in order to be able to do that. That's what Donald Trump is doing, to rebuild the army, to make sure that we can defend that which is our inheritance from the framers of the United States. That's what they should be doing. They should not be going around here, running around the country trying to make everybody an American. That's not the intent of the document. And Donald Trump is the closest to the fulfillment of the document than any president they've had in my lifetime. But I've seen nothing but violations of it, even under the president that you like so much. Those that were not so bad. But see, my view of the presidents is that the ones that do not injure the Constitution of the United States, those are your great presidents. And most of them have injured the document. They would never go along with me in saying one of our great presidents was Calvin Coolidge. They never go along with that. They need to read Amy Schleye's book to appreciate that. She puts it in great context. This is a great president. I mean, he's never mentioned as such, because he was a non-interventionist. He understood restrictions placed upon the presidential office, but there were some things that were not restricted from doing too. Now, there's some room for the president to act, but to act within a certain restrictive space of the executive branch of government. Can people get to that? You have the power to act. The Supreme Court has the power to act within its domain on judicial issues. Do you think that judge? I'm just asking this questions as a oratorical issue. You think that judge had the right when they woke up to what Donald Trump was doing, because they didn't get what he was doing at first, which this man was using an act back in the 18th century under John Adams. And when they found out he was using the act in order to act against what they intended to do, which is to stop this man from stopping the intrusion of these voters that will in fact vote the Democratic line, because anybody here in this country voting for it, look at the polls. 29%, 27% of the voters think the Democrat Party is going in the right direction. That number right there is, you have one. That's not even 1/3. It's 2/3 plus against what they're doing. And what they've been doing is that they when they win the election, they claim it's a mandate. When they lose, they then turn to the non-elected officials and then depend upon them to carry forth the agenda. Those that don't have to answer to the voters, such as these judges, these unelected officials. They say Elon Musk is unelected. Who elected Roberts? And that woman on the bench of the court falsely, Amy Coney Barrett, this fraudster on the court that went on there as a conservative, and look what she's doing. She loved the Constitution and so on and so forth. You don't love it by if you're subverting it. These are words. They love the Constitution. Yeah, you love it enough to push it to the side. They're trying to bring this man down by making it seem they have the authority, and they've sold this idea very well. I give them a lot of credit for their salesmanship, but it's not constitutional. There's nobody on the federal level that can order the president to do anything. And I have as my witness the greatest president that this country has produced, and that's the great George Washington. That he's up there on that mountain, and none should be up there with him. They tried that on George. They tried that on George Washington. They're going to tell George Washington that he had to turn over his notes from his department, his sphere of influence in the government. They wanted to read what was going on in the back channels that led to the ratification of a treaty, that led to the drafting of the treaty, which they didn't like. And then when it was ratified against their some of the people that did not like it and what it actually did, and they wanted those notes where they could begin to look in the background to see if they can get him. Because they didn't. There were some people that did not. I mean, John Jay was not popular. He's one of the Federalist writers, but he was not popular. Jay, you could have left out of Philadelphia. You know, the capital's in Philadelphia at this point. You could have left out of Philadelphia and gone back to John Jay's home, and you could have gone by night to get there, because you could have they were burning him in effigy to such an extent he could have seen his way home by all the burning that was going on. That was a very unpopular that treaty was very unpopular, because they were asking the question, what do we fight for? If he can do this, what was this war about? And John Jay was you go and read about John Jay. That's a very interesting period of history. Our forefathers in this country, yeah, I like that. We had to memorize that Gettysburg Address. 407 years ago, our forefathers. That's powerful. Our forefathers. I love that reference. Our forefathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation. They thought it up. Anybody that cannot admire that created the idea out of whole cloth. Not initially. They were still searching for the way in which it could be done. They knew it had to be done, tie government down. They knew that. But they're not refined how you do that. And what they did at first was simply not giving it any power to do anything. And that may seem politically correct until it's proven not to be politically correct, because look what happened as a result of it. States are put in jeopardy because the federal government is so weak it cannot respond on their behalf. And when they found that out, they had to find another way to do it. And they did find another way to do it by sending, this is what they did. They sent their mines to Philadelphia to fix it. The best, this is Stephen Birmingham book, I believe his name is. The book called The Best and the Brightest. That's a very good book. I may not have the author's name exactly correct. It was a long time ago when I read it. That's a very good book. The Best and the Brightest. They sent the best and the brightest to Philadelphia from each of the 12 of the colonists showed up. Rhode Island did not participate. But those that were there, every last one of the ones they sent there, in various numbers. The largest number that was there was from the state of Pennsylvania, because that's where it was held. And then I think that was followed by, I think Virginia had the second highest, or one or the other. It's been a long time ago when I was in the grad school. I think I probably have forgotten more than most persons really know. Most persons have ever learned about the document, about the framers, because you get older and you're just not as quick. I was very quick when I came out. I'm not too bad now, but I'm not nearly what I was. But I have tremendous respect for the framers, because I realized what they did in that room. And coming from nowhere with nothing, there's nothing to draw from to do the things that they did. It takes a lot to have created something, and then finding it did not work, and then be able to create something that's better, with referencing that you're getting ready to throw out, and you can't use that, but you got to do some of the things that was intended to do, but it's imperfectly drawn up to do it, and cannot do it because it stifles some other. You have to tie power down, but you've got to also have power. Power has to also be able to act. And it's a thin line between more than love and hate. It's a thin line between licensing government to act and then controlling governments who cannot act in such a way in which it forfeits the role it's intended to play. And the role it's intended to play is to be the protector of the rights of the people and make sure they can defend their rights from their adversary. There's only three functions of government, by the way. Only three functions. It doesn't take a lot of money really to run a government. They created all this madness, all this jaw janking they got going on with all these bureaucratic ordinances they've created. This is nonsense. Our friends would come back here. I think I wouldn't doubt if they came back here to be cursing everybody in Washington out. It's like it reminds me. It reminds me of when they brought King back, Dr. King back. In the Boondock. They brought him back. They act like he was in a coma all those years. And they brought King back, and he's at the microphone. Remember, you need to watch that series. This would be what the Frames. It's like what the Frames would do. You got King at the microphone, and they out there doing the fuck your chicken. And King is saying, brothers and sisters, brothers and sisters. They don't want to hear nothing the king got to say at this point. And then they would stop dancing, wouldn't listen. King said, will you, and use that N word, will you please? And they stopped dancing. They couldn't believe King had said that. Did he say what we think he said? Is this what I took all those, use the word, the A word, whooping for? It was like, what would the framers do? It's like, what would King say today? And what would the framers say today? The framers would be out here wanting to kick somebody out of the viper's nest. They want to kick him out of the temple. You don't deserve to be in there, based upon the undermining of the document. We put all that time into creating, and here you are in the parliament undermining the document that was created by those who found the nation. How arrogant that is. You couldn't create anything close to it. Nobody has done it in all the years after it was in fact ratified. Nobody has ever gotten close to creating a document with that amount of perfection in it, and that's why they have to borrow from it. And I've been in some countries now where when I go there, I've talked to government leaders in these countries, and I asked them when they come. I've had them visit me I had a government official come and visit me in, where was I? Because this person I travel with, this guy was he does a lot. When I go there, I have some quiet time. I'm going there to study. I don't have the phone ringing, don't have it writing anything. I can simply catch up on my reading. But the person I travel with, we room together. I didn't say we're sleeping together. We're rooming together. We're not dating. We're traveling together to share the expenses and that of the place that our abode we rent. He goes out all the time and things like that. And they come back. When they leave, I'm reading. They come back, I'm reading. And they just can't believe that. That's what I'm there for. I'm there to take some quiet time to catch up on the things I can't do now because I'm writing every day on Facebook. And that takes a couple of hours. And so it takes some time away from you, and then I finally get a chance to sit down and read and catch up on my reading. But I've had they go out there and tell them, well, we've got a person here that is learning about this, and this, and then they get interested and they want to come by and meet. And this was in Banjul, and the official came by and we had a conversation and that. But when I go into places like Banjul, go to Gambia or go to South Africa, the first thing I want to do is go and look at their constitution. When I was in South Africa, I've been in South Africa twice. I want to look at. I wanted to go and read the Constitution. And when I read the book here about our discord in terms of what they call a civil war, we never had a civil war, but that's what they call it. And I'll use that because I want to use generic terms everybody can understand. But we didn't have a civil war. We had a secession war. They weren't trying to. They were not trying to overthrow the government. They were seceding from the government. They were seceding from the Union. This was a war of secession. But I wanted to read. I wanted to go and read that. Okay, well, they then broke away. What did they write? Go read the book by the Kennedy brothers. This is Donald and Ronald Kennedy from North Carolina. Go read that book called. And you can read the book called "The South Was Right." Read that book. Get the other side. I know you got the northern version of it because the victors write history. They don't. The victors don't write history. The victors demand that history is a history that is in fact taught. Anybody can write history, but if your history is going to be in the school system, all that tells you is that The history that you're reading is history was written because the ones that won the war put their history in the classroom. And so Abraham Lincoln is the hero, and Jefferson Davis is the bad guy, and Robert E. Lee, he was out there, he was half out of his mind, and so on and so forth. And they got all of the renegades. Johnny Umar, you remember that movie? Johnny Umar was a rebel. They used to have a program about that. He's a rebel. So Grant was not a rebel. Lincoln was not a rebel. They were rebels if you understand the Constitution, and nobody understands it better than I do. I'm just telling you that, and that's what I told Napolitano. You were put in your place by a person that is a host of a pro. He's a very good host, very smart man. Uh, Rob Finnerty is a very good host of the program, of his program on Newsmax, and they're coming. That network is coming, and he put Napolitano in his place, big time, bigly. But in terms of going back into the conversation, I wanted Napolitano to say this, and I said it publicly. I'm not Rob Finnerty. And you say those things you said to him, to me. We're gonna. I said in my post, I'm looking for a fight.
And you used to like the judge, didn't you?
Not that I see him now. As he come out of the woodwork more, this man is a foot in the way of the rebirth of this nation that Donald Trump is trying to bring about. Donald Trump is trying to make America great again. And those are the foot. You know, the foot is in the place of the birth, in the birth canal. The baby is rotated at the time of birth, and then that's when the delivery takes place. But before that, the foot is in the way. It's in the birth canal. And when I saw him in that being the foot in the birth canal, I don't like him as much anymore. I've read his books. And anytime you tell me that you're going to have these judges, and you appeal to those judges to write the write the course, and you a person wrote a book called Constitution in Exile, I don't respect that. You wrote the book about the Constitution in Exile, and you're the one that is in fact promoting it being there by what you're doing. You can't tell me the court should resolve. You can't tell me that you believe in the Constitution not being in exile, and you believe that the court should in fact be over the conversation of the three branches of government, and they should singly declare what is constitutional and not constitutional. What makes them able to be construers of the law more than the other two branches of government? Nobody's ever been able to answer that question. And the only reason that they, in fact, think that is because of the judicial review that comes out of the Marbury versus Madison case. And that judicial review is 1803 and not found in the Constitution of the United States. There's no, the word judicial review was not intended by the framers of this country. It's intended by John Marshall. Go read those Federalist Papers up there to around 70 something in the Federalist Papers, 77, somewhere around there, and see what they were saying about the judicial branch of government, which they saw it as the weakest of the three branches of government. But they gave it sovereignty within the space of its judiciary responsibilities. And the judiciary responsibilities are to, in fact, be the interpreters of disputes that occur. You have to have somebody to be the arbiter. But when they start to go into areas where the domain is different from the judicial domain and is not a judicial issue, that's not under their jurisprudence. That's area of the legislative branch of government, and so on. I'll tell you this before we get off the air. These courts, Article 3, Section 1 of the Constitution says that the Constitution creates the Supreme Court, but it allows the legislative branch then to create what it calls the inferior courts. Go back and read that, because the inferior courts cannot be telling the president, who's part of the three branches of government ordained in the Constitution, and these courts are not ordained by the Constitution. They are created by the legislative branch of government. Now, even in the constitutional document, to be ordering the president around, it is unconscionable that would be acceptable, and that is going on. And I'm going to be saying in the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about this. I'm going to recommend some things here that ought to happen if we, in fact, want to embrace and maintain this document rather than throwing it out as we've done, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, which is what we've done today. Okay, I got to get out of here. I want you always to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.